On June 9, 2025, Donald Trump stunned the world by announcing a sweeping 50% tariff on all goods imported from the European Union. The announcement came unexpectedly, sending shockwaves through global markets and catching both allies and rivals off guard. This wasn't a minor trade spat. It was a seismic shift, threatening the foundation of the world's largest economic partnership. The relationship between the U.S. and the EU, built over decades, suddenly seemed fragile and uncertain. The U.S. and EU, economic titans, exchanged trillions in goods and services each year. Trump's move was like slamming a wall down the middle of that superhighway, disrupting the flow of commerce that millions depend on for their livelihoods. Overnight, the price of European cars, wine, cheese, and countless other products would soar for American consumers. Everyday items, once taken for granted, suddenly became luxury goods for many families. Financial markets reeled, and leaders on both sides of the Atlantic scrambled to respond. Investors watched nervously as stocks tumbled, and uncertainty spread through boardrooms and government offices alike. For most people, tariffs seem abstract, but this was about the cost of groceries, the security of jobs, and the future of global trade. Factory workers, small business owners, and everyday shoppers all felt the impact in real time. Trump's declaration wasn't just about economics. It was a direct challenge to decades of open markets and international cooperation. The world watched as leaders debated, wondering if old alliances would hold or fracture under the pressure. The world was left asking, is this the dawn of a new protectionist era? Would other countries follow suit? Or would this spark a global trade war with consequences far beyond tariffs? The answer would shape not just prices, but the very nature of America's role in the world. The ripple effects could redefine alliances, shift power balances, and alter the course of international relations for years to come. The stakes had never been higher. Every decision, every negotiation, now carried enormous weight for the future of the global economy. The global order was suddenly up for grabs, and the world waited anxiously to see what would happen next. Why such a drastic move? What drove the U.S. to take such an aggressive stance against its long-standing allies? Trump called it a matter of fairness, insisting that America had been taken advantage of for too long. He argued the EU used unfair trade practices, keeping American goods out while flooding the U.S. market with their own products, creating an uneven playing field. The persistent trade deficit with Europe, he claimed, proved America was losing out, year after year, as billions of dollars flowed overseas. The 50% tariff was meant to force the EU to the negotiating table and protect American industries from what Trump saw as unfair competition. The tariff would hit everything from German cars and French wine to essential industrial parts and everyday groceries, making European imports far more expensive for American consumers. Trump's supporters saw this as a way to revive U.S. manufacturing, bring jobs back home, and restore pride in American-made products. But it was also a bold statement of America first, a signal that the U.S. would act unilaterally to defend its interests, even at the risk of alienating allies and shaking up the global order. The goal was clear: pressure the EU to drop its barriers and agree to a new, fair deal that would benefit American workers and businesses. The 50% tariff was Trump's sledgehammer to break the old system, shattering decades of established trade norms. The world braced for impact, uncertain of what this new era of economic confrontation would bring. Europe's response was swift and united. The president of the European Commission condemned the tariffs as illegal under WTO rules and vowed to defend EU interests. Leaders across the continent echoed this resolve, calling the move a grave mistake and an act of economic aggression. For once, all 27 EU member states stood together, promising a coordinated response. Within hours, finance ministers were drafting plans for retaliation. The EU had a list of American products ready for counter-tariffs, targeting politically sensitive U.S. industries. Europe framed the dispute as a defense of international law and multilateralism, not just a trade fight. They called for dialogue, but made it clear they would not negotiate under threat. The message was unmistakable: Europe would not be bullied. The EU's response was more sophisticated than a simple tit-for-tat exchange. Rather than reacting impulsively, European leaders took a step back, analyzed the situation, and crafted a strategy that would have a lasting impact. Instead of just retaliating with equal tariffs, Europe launched a formal case at the World Trade Organization, framing the U.S. move as illegal under international trade law. This legal approach signaled that the EU was committed to upholding global rules and norms, not just defending its own interests. Their counter-tariffs were carefully targeted: Harley-Davidson motorcycles, Kentucky bourbon, Florida oranges, each chosen for its economic and political significance. These products came from regions vital to U.S. politics, ensuring the response would be felt where it mattered most. The goal was clear: maximize political pressure on Washington while minimizing pain for European consumers. By focusing on symbolic American goods, the EU could send a strong message without causing unnecessary hardship at home. The EU's unity gave it real leverage. Acting as one, it could rival U.S. economic power. This collective approach made the EU a formidable opponent, showing that its member states could set aside differences for a common cause. This was a trade war on 27 fronts, not just one. Each EU country stood behind the response, amplifying its impact and making it clear that the challenge was not just bilateral, but continental. European leaders emphasized their desire for negotiation, portraying themselves as the reasonable party. They spoke to the media and the world, insisting that dialogue and compromise were still possible. By appealing to the international community and even to American businesses, the EU aimed to isolate Trump's administration. They built alliances, sought support from global partners, and encouraged U.S. companies to speak out against the tariffs. The strategy was threefold: win the legal battle, the political battle, and the battle for public opinion. Each front was crucial for shaping the outcome and influencing future trade relations. The world watched as the EU played the long game. The stakes were global, and every move was calculated to shape not just the present, but the future of international trade. For Americans, the impact was immediate. Prices jumped. French wine, German car parts, Italian groceries, all suddenly cost much more. Businesses relying on European components faced higher costs, forcing them to raise prices or cut profits. U.S. airlines and car makers, dependent on European parts, felt the squeeze. In Europe, exporters saw orders from the U.S. dry up, threatening jobs and entire industries. Factories faced layoffs, and the economic shock rippled across the continent. The EU's retaliatory tariffs hit American products, raising prices for European consumers and businesses. The result? A vicious cycle: higher costs, lost jobs, and shrinking markets on both sides. Ordinary people paid the price for a political gamble. The trade war was no longer abstract. It was hitting wallets everywhere. The pain was real and growing. Tariffs are supposed to protect jobs, but the reality is more complex. Some U.S. industries might gain, but many more, dock workers, truckers, salespeople, would lose as trade collapsed. American factories relying on European parts became less competitive, risking layoffs and lost sales. The net effect? Likely negative for U.S. employment. In Europe, the blow was even harsher. Millions of jobs in cars, aerospace, and food exports were suddenly at risk. Retaliation meant American farmers, tech companies, and manufacturers lost access to their biggest export market. The trade war became a tug-of-war over jobs, with both sides losing ground. The economic pain was deep, and the political fallout just beginning. No one was winning. The cost of conflict was mounting. The U.S. EU clash sent shockwaves through the global economy. Other major nations, China, Japan, Brazil, watched with alarm as supply chains faltered and recession risks grew. The World Trade Organization's authority was on the line. If the U.S. ignored the rules, others might follow. China saw both risk and opportunity. Trade disruption hurt, but a divided West could boost its own influence. Countries began rethinking alliances, hedging bets, and shifting toward regional trade blocs. The trust that underpinned the post-war order was eroding. The world wondered, would the transatlantic alliance bend or break? The outcome would shape global politics for years to come. The stakes were nothing less than the future of the international system. The world stood at a crossroads. Would the tariff war spiral, deepening economic pain and political rifts, or would it force a new, fairer trade deal? The best-case scenario, a tough negotiation leading to a stronger, more balanced partnership. The worst, lasting damage to economies, alliances, and the very idea of international cooperation. For 70 years, America and Europe were bound by shared values and open markets. Now, that foundation was under threat. The answer to Trump's tariff gamble would define the future: more walls or renewed cooperation. The world waited for the verdict.